September 6th here in southern Ontario. Thought I'd do a story time today to distract myself in part. So I take a little break working at home here in the afternoon heat. Found myself getting snippy last night with my roommate. I was taking notes on, I want to put together probably more than one video about the Environmental Enforcement Agency here in Canada and the enforcement officers and just how frightening all that is. My roommate came in half in the bag drinking whiskey with the landlord as they were doing some work out back tobacco. And I found myself getting snippy with him, so I thought today as I take a break I'll just leave my homework and the politics alone. So the story, the Battle of the Eight Boys, some background. It would have been 1971 or 2. Our small town was still quite small then. It hadn't grown to be a bedroom community of Toronto. And so the town was broken into small factions, areas of turf amongst us kids. You know, in those days your parents gave you a pig shave when school was out. You got a new pair of canvas runners and you were basically cut loose on your own all summer. You were to be home for dinner, and when the street lights went out, lunch might be caught at the parents of whoever kids you were hanging with, or maybe we just have a fish fry beside the stream or eat apples and berries all day, whatever. It was like that. But we didn't transgress each other's turf, so to speak. Now at this point, I kind of have to go to the map to explain how the town was laid out. So can I see what's going on here? Okay. Main Street running north and south and Mill Street running east and west. The town was about a mile across and pretty much as deep running north and south. The park and the lake were considered neutral territory. The downtown kids had their downtown. There was what we called the new subdivision, the wartime subdivision, you know, the houses built for the soldiers returning from the Second World War. Our farm, 60 acres, the railroad tracks. Town ended, town line, or city limits if you will, town limits was just to the north, and Lakeview subdivision. Now Lakeview was my territory. I hung with the kids there, we all went to school, was here. I delivered newspapers there, plowed with my little 8N tractor the snow in the winter. We'd have trouble sometimes with the town kids coming onto the farm and wanting to ride the ponies. Lawsuits weren't an issue in those days, but, you know, potential injuries to the animals, so we'd try to chase them off. So, one day, it was late August, I think. You know, those desultory days in late summer when little boys get bored. You're tired of your slingshots and your homemade bows and arrows. It's hot, you don't want to travel around too much, the fishing's not so good. So myself and my crew, as Dad called us, or referred to them, Doug, my age, his 1 year younger brother Bob, and their immediate neighbor Scott, who was Bob's age, we were hanging around. And one of the girls came. She'd been out checking the fence line on the back of the farm and said that the wartime kids were threatening this line here, which now I'll come back to the site of the battle. The Battle of the Eight Boys. Remember, we're all 8 or 9 years old at this time. So whichever gal it was had been out riding, checking on this fence line, and had seen the town was building a road, a bypass here, which was just roughly hacked out gravel at the time. And the wartime boys had come from the wartime and were messing around on the end of this cedar bush, the old tumble down fence, kind of poking out on the road here. Excuse me. Well, of course, we couldn't let them transgress the turf lines, so the four of us went poking out along here, spying on them, seeing what was going on. And there was about 7 of them, 6 or 7, and one scout as we perceived them up in this big dead elm tree. Now, again, we felt threatened by this. We couldn't let them encroach on our territory on the farm. So we were outnumbered. But they didn't know we were there. Those back 2 fields hadn't been utilized in a couple of years. We hadn't taken hay off it, nor had it been pastured. So, you know, the grass had grown up. So the 4 of us made a battle plan. You know, we had to run these guys off despite being outnumbered. So we picked up good throwing stones from the fence line, the tree line, laid them out in about a dozen spots in the field. Our plan of attack was the element of surprise and confuse them on numbers. We didn't want them to know there was only 4 of us against the 6, 7, or 8 of them. So we had our little piles of stones, our pockets full. And there were like three kids out on the, you know, picking and kicking stones on the formation of the roadway, and some more poking along, you know, on the bush line, and there's one guy up in the tree. So, screaming like apes, we pop up, barrage of fuselage of stones. And our whole plan was no more than 2 of us would pop up at any given time, and we'd move to another pile and take our hats off and on, maybe our t-shirts. And the first foray worked really well. We just hammered these poor 3 kids caught out on the road. And, you know, they ran squalling into the bush, into the cedar bush, and disappeared, leaving about 3 kids largely unscathed, you know, on the fence line, and they'd retreated into the bush. So back into the grass we go, you know. And sure enough, the 3 other boys, they rally themselves, and they come out. It's all, you know, hoo, 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 whoa, 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 oh, oh. No real words, you know what I mean? Maybe the odd curse in there, but mostly just, you know, ape-like hooting. Well, they were at a serious disadvantage. They didn't have any rocks in that cedar bush. You know, they're flinging sticks and getting just whaled with the stones, right? We drove them off again, doing the pop-up hat change t-shirt thing. They made a couple of brave attempts, but, you know, you get hit upside the head with a stone, you're 8, 9 years old, you know, you cry. That's defeat when you cry. That's the whole objective, right? So one brave soul remained at the end, you know, shaking and oh. Okay, we'll drive them, we'll put the run right on them. So we chase them into the cedar bush. Again, our pockets are loaded with stones. Our armory's good still, you know. So he wisely flees, and this lets us get into what we considered their territory. We'd never really had the courage to foray into that cedar bush. Now we're in there, we can get the lay of the land, you know, the deer trails. And they'd made a half-hearted effort at some little fort that they'd tried to build. And we laughed at that. They didn't have any used baling twine or saws or axes. We considered their technology to be inferior to our own, and we'd run them off. We felt pretty good about it all, you know. Victory was ours. So we come out, and the sentry is still up in this tree, up in this big dead elm tree. And this kind of causes us some consternation, you know. Why hasn't he left? We'd heard these wartime kids were tough. And there were more of them than us. We didn't know their numbers, but, you know, there's a lot of them, right? Yeah, there's a lot of them. Yeah, I don't know how many of them there are. And the last one we chased off had been, you know, he was going to rally the troops and he'd be back. Excuse me. So we decided we'd better run the sentry out of the tree. So we tell him, you get down from there and go away. He's just up the tree, perched there silently. So we barrage him a couple of times with stones, just hammer him. And he stays up in the tree, he doesn't come down, he doesn't cry. We retreat, consternated by this, right? Oh man, he's got to be as tough as nails. Why hasn't he run away? Why hasn't he cried? Meanwhile, we're nervous about, you know, we're right on the territorial line here, you know. So we decide we're going to give this kid a good drubbing. You two take his head, I'll take his ribs, you take his elbows and his knees. We hammered this poor kid up in this tree. And he refused to say anything, refused to climb down and flee. Probably thought we were going to beat him up. And again, just refused to cry. So I think we went at him twice with these stones, you know. Now he's bleeding from 6 or 8 places. He still won't cry or say anything or leave. I'd find out later when I went to high school, because we had the 2 public schools. When we went to high school, everybody merged and became sort of normal, you know. Anyways, his name was Rocky. I don't know what his real name is to this day. Everybody calls him Rocky, except maybe his parents. I don't know what his real name is. Poor Rocky, he was the kid stuck in the tree. So finally, we retreated. Kind of, you know, oh, if they're all as tough as that kid is, oh man, what if they all come back? So we took our little piles of stone, hid them along the fence line, and we went back as we come to our map, having left poor Rocky up in this tree, battered and bleeding. The other kids never did return. So we stashed our little rocks there, and then we stashed a line back here in case they were to return. You know what I mean? Because really there were only the 4 of us. We couldn't really get any more numbers out of the subdivision to back us up. We were on our own. So that's the story. No real climatic ending. That was our day, the Battle of the Ape Boys. I still feel bad about Rocky. I never really did become friends with him and apologize for that incident. I suppose he got over it as well. I don't know. But yeah, that's the mentality of 9 and 10-year-old boys. They get worse around 11 years of age. I don't think there's anything more dangerous than 11-year-old boys. You know, at 12, well, in those days anyways, around 12 you start getting interested in girls. Not pretending you don't like them anymore. They have cootie bugs. And you've outgrown your G.I. Joes and your slingshots and your homemade bows and arrows. And around 11 years of age, that's when the pyromania comes in, you know. Nothing worse than an unsupervised group of 11-year-old boys. Of course, the world's a different place now. They play games on their phones and computers, so it's a different world. Anyways, that was the story of the Battle of the Ape Boys. Hope it amused you. Distracted me for a few minutes. Anyways,